Can they open up all the votes and then figure out who didn't vote and then start filling in votes for them? And just think about the type of exposure that you get, because you have to get a whole bunch of people to agree to collude and cheat this way. Once you start relying on people on the ground to do this stuff, there's just the risk increases exponentially. This is not how you tilt elections in your favor. And the Republicans should know about this because they do it all the time. All right, welcome to the Brown Perspective. This is RO, and I'm here with the one and only Eduardo Capetillo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Bien, bien, aquí estamos presentes.
So, big news this morning. As we were mentioning in our previous recording, they have announced the election for Biden. If you missed that conversation, we have a previous recording that you can go and listen to where we break down our reaction and our thoughts on this historic election.
Yes, and we have also a new vice president, y'all.
That's right, Kamala Harris. So now that the results are in, we have to see what the aftermath is because, as we mentioned earlier as well, Trump already released a statement. And as people are aware, he has been, from the beginning, hinting that there's irregularities, that there's cheating, the foul play. You're starting to see a lot of conspiracies on Twitter and Facebook and social media about how Democrats are cheating, and even Trump, right, at the night of election, he's saying, well, I was winning, I was getting ready to win, and then all of these votes magically appear as if people didn't already know and had been told that he's going to have a sizable lead on election night, and then they will count the mail-in votes afterwards, and then that's going to give a surge to Joe Biden. So regardless of that, he's still stoking the flames of conspiracy, and his base has started. You start seeing posts that his officials, Republican poll watchers, were not allowed to watch the count. And I even saw a video this morning of supposedly someone filling out ballots. I don't know if you saw that one, but someone filling out ballots and processing them as well. And then you could do like a minute of research on that video, and you find out that what they do is sometimes when people mail in the ballots, they fill them out improperly, or for a number of reasons, they have to essentially refill them out. So somebody does it copies them over to a real ballot. And so they recorded a guy doing that, which happens all the time. And now they're using that as proof that there was election fraud.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, and there's others as well. And so, but the thing is that at this point, it's all conspiracy. Even Trump has not offered anything substantial, any concrete proof that there was voter fraud. And if we go to the statement that he released, where he's saying, in Pennsylvania, for example, our legal observers were not permitted meaningful access to watch the counting process. Legal votes decide who is president, not the news media. So again, he is saying that they were not permitted meaningful access, which means they were given access. Trump is just not happy with whatever access they gave him. He wanted more. So if they allowed him 3 or 4 poll watchers to stand within a certain distance of the ones that are counting the votes, maybe he wanted 6, and maybe he wanted them literally hovering over them, breathing on their shoulders. Right? But this is such a weak claim here. He's not going to be able to build a case on this.
The irony that it was the Republican election officials in various states and across the country, across legislatures, like in Michigan and other parts.
Arizona as well.
Yeah, where they tried the voter suppression, right? They try to make it as difficult for people to vote, even in a pandemic, making them risk their lives to vote in person, and not doing some of the common sense things that other states like California did to make sure that everybody's vote was counted. So it starts there, and just the fact that is actually and I think I heard that it's ironic that in so many other in so many other countries, like in Latin America and other parts, is usually the person or the folks who are doing the voting fraud are obviously the people in power, not not the ones that are challenging the people in power or the state. So in this case, the irony that Trump, who is in office and who has a lot of Republican support across the states, as I mentioned, trying to implement this voter suppression measures, claiming that the party out of power is the one that's trying to win the election through irregular means.
You could make the argument that in states that are run by Democrats, that even though the president is Republican, that they would have a way to orchestrate something to favor them. When I think about the fraud and the people that are making these claims, I don't think people really understand how cheating works or how these politicians skew the results in their favor. I think,
Manipulate the system. Manipulate the system, or
yeah, exactly. So Trump supporters are accusing the Democrats of stealing the election and cheating. And I think they have a very simplistic view of how this works and how if the Democrats wanted to cheat, how they would do it. And it's all about risk and plausible deniability. And cheating on election day, if your strategy is based entirely on finding a way to get more votes on election day, you're probably going to lose because that's just not, it's so difficult and you're exposed so much, there's so much risk. Like, what are they going to do? They're going to orchestrate with the U.S. Postal Service so that they can sift through votes of counties that lean Republican and discard them. I mean, just think about how much risk there is to an operation like that. And the operation has to be sizable enough to be significant. Even if you just focus on the areas that you think are the critical ones to where you want to affect the vote count. And then what you can do is, can the post office or can the voting centers where they're tallying up the votes, can they open up all the votes and then figure out who didn't vote and then start filling in votes for them? And just think about the type of exposure that you get because you have to get a whole bunch of people to agree to collude and cheat this way. Once you start relying on people on the ground to do this stuff, there's just the risk increases exponentially. This is not how you tilt elections in your favor. And the Republicans should know about this because they do it all the time. They do voter purges where they remove voters from the rolls, and they do it in such a way that it's a gray area that technically they can claim that it's not illegal, right? So they'll mail you a postcard, and if you don't return it, they unregister you. They can say that you haven't voted in the last 2 or 3 elections and then they remove you. They can say that you've moved to a different state. They can claim that it was a computer glitch and it incorrectly matched your name with that of a felon. But then when you look at the overall results of how many people were purged, it happens to surprisingly be African American or Latinos that were predominantly affected, right? So that's how these guys, that's how they tilt elections. That's how they cheat. And the Democrats do it too. It's not like the Democrats are new to this also. Look at California. Look at what they did to Bernie Sanders. You needed, if you're registered independent in California, they asked you to apply for a crossover ballot so that you could vote in the Democratic primary instead of having it open. And you might think, well, what's the problem with that? You can still vote. You just have to apply to for a crossover ballot. The problem is that the more steps that you introduce to allow people to vote, each time you remove a certain percentage of people because they're going to forget to do that. They're not going to know that they had to do that. And then also the way that all of the Democratic establishment came together and essentially orchestrated for Buttigieg, for Amy Klobuchar to drop out of the race and just let Biden go head to head. That's how you orchestrate elections in your favor. That's how these guys, that's how the politicians do it. They don't cheat on election day by filling out votes for people that are dead. That's just way too risky to do things like that, and people don't understand that. So that's my take on this whole cheating. When I hear all these allegations, and so they have nothing, they won't be able to prove anything. That's my
Yeah.
take on this.
So what you're saying is that they're more sophisticated than we think.
Exactly, the cheating is sophisticated because think about it, they've been doing it for centuries. This is a continuation of these methods that they employ to cheat. You don't think parties were thinking 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 100 years ago how to get the population to vote in their favor? These are techniques that are refined. This isn't elementary school type of cheating where you're gonna say, "Hey, let's get all the people let's figure out all the dead people and let's fill out votes against them." I'm sure somebody threw that suggestion on the board and somebody told them right away, "Look, if you do that, you can easily prove that all these people that were dead voted, and if you can prove that, and if you can prove it across the states, then that might lead back to us. So maybe that's too risky. There's easier ways. There's better ways to do it." The
And
Republicans do this all the time, and
mhm.
going similar to what you were saying earlier, for them to claim that the Democrats cheated, come on, um, they both do it, but it's not as out in the open as people are claiming now that the Democrats did it.
Yeah, it's true, and I think it even goes as far as redistricting and how districts are
Yeah,
gerrymandered
gerrymandering.
to give you a particular outcome or a particular electorate that basically guarantees your party wins all the time. But I think going
within
back to
within
your
the
oh, go
within
ahead.
the limits of the law. Like everything always has to be, we're doing what we think is legal within the limits.
Hmm.
And if it's a gray area, then even then they can still claim, well, no, it's still legal, and then you can file lawsuits to prevent them from doing that. But it always has to be that it's always with plausible deniability, and the risk has to be low. Like, come on, orchestrating with all of the people, the post office, with all of the mail collectors, so that they can burn ballots. And come on, like that's like your
Yeah.
first pass at cheating. That's like the very simplistic way of trying to cheat. These things are way more organized than that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think going back to your point here in California about um, independents needing to go to an additional step to participate in the Democratic primaries or Republican primaries. I think that's a fair point. I think the Democrat and me wanted to say, well, yes, I mean, if you choose to be qualified as an independent and not as a Democrat, then if you do want to weigh in either party, then it is on you to do what it you need to do in order to quote unquote have the privilege to vote in my party's primary. And on the other hand, I can also see how part of the reason that so many Californians have gone independent or no party affiliation is because they're tired of both parties, and I think they should get the ability to vote on the side that on both sides, right? And I think the state should make it as easy as possible to say, okay, this particular set of voters are independent or not non-part no party affiliation, so we should send them the information for both parties so they can vote according to what they choose, right? And that goes to your point of the parties do have rules. They're the ones that have that make up the rules as to who votes in their primaries and who doesn't, and obviously they're designed to keep their party and their folks in line.
Exactly, and a more extreme version of that is the Republicans back then requiring literacy tests, right? Or the voter ID laws. And you can make reasonable claims. You can make reasonable claims that whoever votes needs an ID. But you know the only reason why they're doing that is because they know that it favors them.
Hmm.
So that's all within the law, within the parameters of what's legal to do. And that's how these elections get swayed, not by instructing mailmen to burn ballots or by instructing vote counters to fill out additional forms of dead people.
Hmm. No, sure. And I think all this conversation and what happened and what's happening with the election right now also makes me think about what is it that we need to do as a society for more of us to be better educated voters, to be able to both understand the process and also be able to withstand or recognize misinformation as it happens, right? Because I think one certainly, and that just last night, some things that I heard some people saying about the other side were just like it was like, wait, all the conspiracy theories, all of these things that just didn't that were not factual. So how do you get to a point where the electorate is better informed and better able to say, you know what you're saying is not true, is not is not fact, that's BS. I'm gonna vote the way that I'm feeling called to vote based on the facts and based on my values.
Yeah, look, that's a tough one because part of me thinks that the media, the political establishment, wants an uninformed voter
Hmm.
because then it's easier to manipulate them, to scare them, to get them to vote for Biden, where Biden didn't really offer anything substantial. I mean, all they needed to do was say Biden is not Trump. Trump is worse. There's no Medicare for all. There's no commitment to end foreign wars, to stop military aid to Saudi Arabia, which is bombing the hell out of Yemen, right? There's nothing like that. No promise from Biden for immigration reform. So the media doesn't hold these politicians accountable to the demands of the people, because if you ask people in polls, even though we already said that these pollsters failed epically, still
Wah, wah, wah.
if you ask people, they overwhelmingly favor a lot of progressive policies that neither of these two candidates are doing it. So here the political establishment has a problem that they want the voters just educated enough to come out and vote, but not educated enough where they actually hold these politicians accountable. Because if all the voters across the United States were actually well informed and they were impervious to manipulation, they wouldn't vote for either of these guys. They would vote for an alternative.
Yeah.
That's the line that these guys have to straddle. So I don't know how you fix that, because in order to fix that, it has to come at the community level from the people that empower themselves. It's not going to come from their political leaders. And by the way, change never comes from the political establishment. It comes from the bottom up after they've killed like hundreds or thousands of people to try to suppress these natural um, surges or organizing and shifts and shifts that move the entire population in a certain direction. Those things are always messy and bloody because they always try to target the leaders, but sometimes they build enough momentum that they can't do it. So, but yeah, change comes from the bottom up, not from the top down.
Well, I think you make a good point of the media because the media does have an outsized role in informing perception and the narrative. And I think in many ways, the media is geared towards entertainment and profits versus education and giving people the information they need to be informed voters. And I think the fact that they also focus on those sensationalists, like the chisme,
Mm-hmm.
like this person said that, versus the substance of the matter. So that's a good point. And I think you're right. It's definitely about people power. And I think part of that is through education and and making sure that people are educated, have the opportunity to educate themselves, to be able to demand and continue to fix and get to a place where the institutions, whether they're parties, whether it is government, whether it's the media, are serving their interests versus the other way around. So I think it will take, it's definitely it's from the bottom up. but it also takes a realization of saying like, hey, wait a minute, this is backwards. Let me tell you what I want, and this is how what you need to do. And if you don't, well, I'm not gonna give you my money. I'm not gonna give you my vote. I'm not gonna give you my attention. I'm gonna focus on the things that that I know are important to me. So in some ways, it's almost like reclaiming that agency that we have individually and collectively to make things better, which I know oftentimes does happen. Like I think that's the moment that we are in right now, where as a society we said, "Hey, what happened to George Floyd? What's happening to so many other African Americans is messed up." And one of the reasons why here in California there were some progressive things on the ballot that got passed, and there were some other things that didn't pass. But I know specifically here in LA that the majority of the LA County, the majority of voters said, you know what, we agree that we need to dedicate at least 10% of the budget to alternatives to incarceration and to providing resources and services to communities versus locking them up and throwing away the key.
Yeah, and I do want to do a segment on the results of the California election and the propositions, but I think we can save that for another segment. It will take us a bit longer to cover. I do want to cover some of those because a few of those went against what you would think a liberal, progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wanted to focus on fraud and collusion and just trying to put some thoughts out there as to how it works, and to say that from a legal perspective, I don't think the Republicans have a case. So let's see how long it takes Donald Trump to come to terms with this. I think his Republican establishment will come to terms with it, and then they will have to figure out a way to deal with the petulant man-child.
That's true. And hopefully we'll do a good job at that.
Yeah, so will be an interesting next few days, and maybe a week or two, to see how this unfolds.
If anything, as probably most parents out there know, we'll just give Trump the iPad so he can watch or play his games. Screen time, baby.
Yeah, right now they probably have him strapped to a chair, and they're limiting his phone access. They probably give him phone access, but it has to be supervised so that he doesn't go on Twitter and just say what he always says. It's nonsense.
Well, yeah, but the scary thing is that, he does, there's a lot of state secrets and a lot of things that he now knows, and that now that he's going to be out there, and it will be interesting to see how that information may or may not come out.
Oh, don't worry. Once the Republicans are on board that this is over, they have ways to keep him quiet. I'm not worried about that.
Damn, you're such house of cards, babe. You're like the Underwoods. Is it
Yeah,
Underwoods? Yeah, the Underwoods.
yeah, it's more Machiavellian mindset for this. Yeah, they'll find a way to keep him quiet. Don't worry about this. I don't think they'll prosecute him. I don't think they'll make a big effort to try to investigate his activities or his dealing with foreign governments, his taxes. I think the Democrats at some point will say, "Look, we just want to move forward, and we don't want to worry about that." So for people that are getting their hopes up and think that Trump may go to jail, I don't think that's going to happen. So, all right. So, thanks everyone for listening. If you enjoy these conversations, make sure to subscribe. Listen to us at The Brown Perspective. We are on YouTube and Instagram. Nos vemos.
Ciao.